You were trapped undercover. No way out. It's the 41st day since your handler went silent. Not 41 hours. 41 days. You are sitting in a kitchen in South Chicago that smells like cigarettes and motor oil, eating eggs that a man named Reaper cooked for you because Reaper, despite everything his file says about him, makes good eggs and does it without being asked when someone looks like they haven't slept. You haven't slept. Not because you're afraid of the men in this house. You stopped being afraid of them around day 60 of the operation, which is either a professional achievement or a warning sign, and you stopped being sure which one somewhere around day 90. You haven't slept because 41 days ago, your handler, a DEA senior agent named Kowalski who has run undercover operations for 19 years and who has never, not once, missed a scheduled contact, stopped answering. The protocol for handler silence is clear. 72 hours without contact. Activate the emergency signal. The emergency signal is a specific purchase made at a specific store, a pack of Marlboro Reds at a CVS on 63rd Street, paid in cash, which triggers a flag in a monitoring system that someone, somewhere, is supposed to be watching. You activated it on day 4. Nothing. You activated it again on day 11. Nothing. Day 23. Nothing. Reaper puts a plate in front of you. He sits down across the table. He says, "You look like a man who's trying to solve a problem he can't talk about." You say, "I'm fine." He says, "I know you're fine." Fine and okay are different things. You eat the eggs. Reaper is not wrong. You are fine in the operational sense. Your cover is intact. Your position inside the organization is more secure than it has ever been, and the intelligence you have accumulated over the last 16 months is, by any professional measure, extraordinary. The problem is that extraordinary intelligence is worth nothing if you cannot get it out. And you cannot get it out because the only thread connecting you to the world that sent you here has been cut. And you don't know why, or by whom, or whether it was cut from their end or yours. To understand what that means, what 41 days of silence actually costs, you have to go back to the beginning. Before the kitchen. Before Reaper. Before the operation became something that the operation was never supposed to become. 16 months before the 41st day. You are 33 years old. 7 years with the DEA, the last 3 embedded in the Chicago field office working Midwest distribution networks. You have run informants, managed controlled buys, coordinated with the FBI and ATF on 3 joint operations. You are good at building trust in small increments. Your supervisor calls it your defining professional quality. That quality is about to be used against you in ways your supervisor has not fully considered. The target is a distribution network operating out of the South Side that the Chicago field office has been trying to map for 4 years. Not a cartel. The supply chain runs through the Sinaloa corridor, but the Chicago operation is locally managed, structurally independent, adaptive in ways that have made it extraordinarily difficult to prosecute. Every time the field office gets close, the organization contracts, changes 1 or 2 key nodes, and re-expands 6 months later in a slightly different configuration. The man at the center is called the architect. Real name, Gerald Monroe. 53 years old. Former city planner, actual city planner, 12 years with the Chicago Department of Planning and Development, who at some point in his mid-30s began applying the same systems thinking that he used to design municipal infrastructure to the problem of moving product across a metropolitan area. The result is an organization that functions less like a criminal enterprise and more like a logistics company that happens to traffic narcotics. The field office has one photograph of Monroe. It was taken at a city council meeting in 2009. In it, he is wearing a lanyard and holding a rolled-up set of blueprints. Your supervisor, ASAC Hargrove, puts the photograph on the table. She says, 4 years. 3 informants. 1 undercover insertion that lasted 6 weeks before the officer was burned. We have his name, his history, and the knowledge that he is running something significant. We have nothing that connects him to it. She slides a folder across the table. She says, "We want to try again." Longer insertion. Someone with the patience to build from the ground up and not rush the center. You open the folder. Inside, a cover identity, a backstory, an entry point, and a handler assignment. The handler is Kowalski. You have worked with Kowalski twice before. He is meticulous, precise, and constitutionally unable to miss a scheduled contact. You consider this when you look at his name on the assignment sheet. You say, What's the extraction protocol if something goes wrong? Hargrove says, standard. Handler initiates on your signal or on operational judgment. You say, and if the handler is unavailable? She says, there's a secondary contact. Agent Diaz. She's in the file. You find Agent Diaz's contact information in the file. A phone number and a physical dead drop location. A specific bench in Millennium Park where a chalk mark means you need emergency extraction. You memorize both. You will need them. What you don't know, what no one in that room knows yet, is that 6 months into your operation, a federal grand jury in Washington will begin investigating ASAC Hargrove for an unrelated matter. And when that investigation starts, every operation she has authorized will be placed under administrative review. And during an administrative review, operational contacts are suspended. And nobody will remember to tell the man in the field. Marcus Tate. Your cover identity is Marcus Tate. 33 years old. Born in Gary, Indiana. Close enough to Chicago to explain cultural fluency, far enough to limit the verification network. Background in street-level distribution, no formal organizational affiliation. A man who has worked as an independent contractor in the gray economy of the drug trade for a decade. Reliable, discreet, and available. The entry point is a man named Dez. Dez runs a legitimate car detailing business on Halstead that operates as the first point of contact for independent operators the Architects Network is considering bringing in. He is not a decision maker. He is a filter. His job is to assess whether someone is what they say they are before they move any further into the organization. Kowalski's instruction on insertion day is specific and absolute. Dez will test you in ways that are not announced as tests. Every conversation is a test. Every inconsistency will be noted and will compound. Do not explain yourself unless asked. Do not volunteer history. Let him pull the thread. The more he pulls, the more real the thread becomes. You spend your first week in the neighborhood establishing Marcus Tate as a physical presence. The coffee shop on 63rd where you become a regular. The gym on Wentworth where you work out every morning at 7. The particular corner store where you buy the same things in the same order twice a week. Routine is identity. Marcus Tate is a man who exists in a specific geography in a specific way, and anyone checking his existence will find it. You approach Dez on day 11. Not cold, through a mutual contact arranged by Kowalski, a cooperating witness who introduces you as someone looking for work and worth a conversation. The introduction is a door, not a guarantee. You have to walk through it yourself. Dez talks to you for 20 minutes over coffee. He is unremarkable in appearance and remarkable in attention. The kind of listener who seems casual and misses nothing. He asks about Gary. About your work history. About why you came to Chicago. You give him Marcus Tate's answers. You give them at Marcus Tate's pace, which is unhurried because Marcus Tate is a man who has learned that rushing answers is what people do when they are not sure of them. Dez finishes his coffee. He says, I'll be in touch. He is in touch 4 days later. That Tuesday night, you sit in your apartment on West 69th and call Kowalski's check-in line. You give him the contact timeline, the substance of the conversation, Dez's observable behaviors. Kowalski confirms receipt. He says, good start. Now wait. You wait. For the next 3 months, you wait and work and report and wait again. Kowalski is there every Tuesday, every Thursday, every scheduled contact without exception. His voice on the check-in line is the most consistent thing in your life. And then it isn't. Day 1 of silence. The first missed contact is a Thursday in month 7. You call the check-in line at the scheduled time. It rings. No answer. This has never happened. You wait 1 hour and call again. Rings. No answer. The protocol is clear. One missed contact is not an emergency. Operational circumstances occasionally prevent a scheduled check-in. You note it. You continue. You call again at the next scheduled time. The next scheduled time is Tuesday. Tuesday. No answer. Thursday. No answer. On day 6 of silence, you activate the emergency signal for the first time. The Marlboro Reds at the CVS on 63rd. Cash. You stand at the register and feel, for the first time since insertion, something you cannot afford to feel. Fear. Not for yourself. For what the silence means. Because there are only a few categories of explanation. Kowalski is incapacitated, injury, illness, something that happened before he could brief a replacement. The operation has been suspended from above, which would mean someone decided to leave you in place without notification, which is either an oversight or a decision, and you cannot determine which from inside a house in South Chicago. Or the operation has been compromised at the handler level, which means someone on the law enforcement side has been identified, and if Kowalski is compromised, then the question of what he has told anyone before or after that compromise is not a question you can answer from where you are. None of these categories has a good outcome. You go back to the house. You make coffee. Reaper is watching television. Dez is in the back room on a call. You sit in a chair and you do the only thing available to you. You keep being Marcus Tate. What you know and cannot send. By month 7, the month the silence begins, you have built something that the field office has been trying to build for 4 years. You have the architect's full operational structure. You have it because 3 months ago, Gerald Monroe, the former city planner, the man with the lanyard and the blueprints, began including you in planning sessions. Not because you sought him out. Because Dez recommended you, and Dez's recommendation carries weight because Dez has been right about people for 12 years, and Monroe trusts data over instinct in all things including personnel. Monroe is exactly what his background suggests. He talks about the operation in the language of urban planning, nodes and corridors, redundancy and capacity, stress points and load distribution. He draws maps. Actual maps, on large paper, with precise annotations. He is proud of what he has built in the specific way that engineers are proud of functioning systems, and he wants the people inside the system to understand the elegance of how it works. Over 3 months of planning sessions, you have memorized everything. 14 distribution nodes, 3 supply corridors, a cash processing system rotating through 11 legitimate businesses, and the identities of 2 law enforcement officials on Monroe's payroll, their names, their ranks, what they provide and what they receive. Those 2 names are the thing that keeps you awake at night. Because those 2 names mean that the silence from Kowalski might not be administrative. It might be structural. It might be that someone inside the law enforcement apparatus connected to this operation has been managing information flow, and the silence is not an oversight but an outcome. You have no way to know. You have no way to get the information out. You have no way to leave. Because on day 19 of silence, Monroe gives you a direct operational role, coordinating the handoff between 2 distribution nodes on the south side. It is the most trusted position you have ever held in operation, and it comes at the worst possible moment, because accepting it means deepening your cover at the exact point when every instinct you have is telling you to find an exit. You accept it. You accept it because refusing would end the cover and leaving would raise questions that have no safe answers, and because the only thing more dangerous than staying is leaving in a way that looks like leaving. This is what trapped means. Not restrained. Not threatened. Just, there is no available move that doesn't make things worse. Reaper. Reaper's real name is Andre Williams. 41 years old. He has been with Monroe's organization for 8 years, which in this world is a career. He does security, not in the aggressive sense, in the architectural sense. He assesses risk. He identifies weak points. He is very good at it. He is also, despite everything, a person. He has a mother on the west side he visits every Sunday. He coaches a youth football team in the fall, volunteer, no pay, every Saturday morning regardless of operational demands. He has a particular gift for finding the thing that a given teenager needs to hear on a given day, and this gift is entirely wasted in every other context of his life. You know all of this because over 16 months you have been in close proximity to Reaper in the way that people who share professional risk become proximate. You have not sought his friendship. It arrived anyway, the way real things do, without announcement. On the 41st day, over eggs, Reaper says, you've been somewhere else for about 6 weeks. You say, work stress. He says, the coordinator thing? You say, yeah. He says, Monroe trusts you more than anyone he's brought in since Dez. That's not nothing. You say, I know. He says, so what's the problem? You look at your eggs. The problem is that you are a federal agent who has been abandoned inside a criminal organization with more intelligence than the field office has gathered in 4 years, and no means of transmission and no extraction support, and the growing suspicion that the silence from your handler is connected to 2 names on a corruption list that you cannot get to anyone who can act on them. You say, "Nothing I can talk about." Reaper nods. He says, "Fair." He says, "But whatever it is, it's going to come to a head. Things that sit that long always do. Better to choose when than wait for when to choose you." You look at him. You say, "That's specific advice." He says, "I've been waiting on things before. It's always worse than moving." He takes your plate. He washes it. That afternoon you make a decision. The bench in Millennium Park. The secondary contact. Agent Diaz. The bench in Millennium Park with a chalk mark. You have not used it because using it requires leaving the Southside neighborhood in a way that has to be explained, and because you have not been certain that Diaz is clear, that whatever compromised Kowalski, or whatever administrative action silenced him, has not also reached her. On day 42, you tell Monroe you need to run an errand on the north side. Personal. He doesn't ask for details. Monroe never asks for personal details because Monroe respects the separation between the operational self and the private one. It is one of his few genuinely decent qualities. You take the red line north. You sit in the train car and watch the city change outside the windows, south side to loop, the specific visual transition that Chicago makes in the space of 20 minutes. You have not been on this train in 16 months. Millennium Park. The bean, the fountain, the particular density of a tourist Saturday that makes surveillance difficult and meetings easy to disguise. You find the bench. You make the chalk mark, a small horizontal line on the left rear leg, and you sit. And you wait. Diaz arrives 11 minutes later. She sits at the opposite end of the bench. She is reading a book. She does not look at you. She says, quietly, without moving her eyes from the page, "We know. The review suspended all contact protocols 6 weeks ago. Kowalski couldn't reach you without violating the review order. We've been monitoring your emergency signals." You say, "Then why didn't you respond?" She says, "The review covered secondary contacts too. I've been trying to find a way to reach you that doesn't get flagged for 3 weeks." You say, "There are 2 names in the intelligence I've been holding. Law enforcement. On Monroe's payroll." Her book lowers slightly. Then it goes back up. She says, "Say them." You say them. Quietly. On a bench in Millennium Park on a Saturday with tourists walking past. She is still for a moment. She says, "One of those names is on the review board." You say, "I know." She says, "That's why the contact stopped. Not because of Hargrove's investigation. Not because of an administrative oversight. Because someone inside the review process identified the Chicago operation, identified Kowalski, and applied pressure to suspend contact before you could transmit the names that would surface their involvement. You were not abandoned. You were silenced." Diaz turns a page. She says, "I need 2 weeks to get this to someone clean. Can you hold 2 weeks?" You think about the kitchen. Reaper's eggs. Monroe's maps on large paper. The 16 months of a life that is not yours that you have been living so completely that some mornings it takes a moment to remember which life it is. You say, "I can hold 2 weeks." She says, "Go back. Don't change anything. Don't signal again. I'll find you." She gets up and walks toward the fountain. You sit on the bench for a few more minutes. Then you take the red line south. Day 56. Diaz finds you on day 56. Not at the bench. At the coffee shop on 63rd, the one where Marcus Tate has been a regular for 16 months. She sits down across from you with a cup she didn't order from this counter and says, at a normal conversational volume as though catching up with someone she knows, "Tomorrow morning. 6 a.m. Federal warrants. You need to be somewhere the organization isn't." You say, "How clean?" She says, "Very. The name on the review board has been removed from the case. New prosecutor, new team. Everything you transmitted through Kowalski plus everything you're going to give us in the debrief." You say, "Kowalski?" She says, "Fine. He's been sitting in a box in Quantico waiting for this to clear. He sends a message. He says he's sorry." You say, "Tell him the eggs were good." She doesn't understand the reference. That's fine. She leaves. You finish your coffee. You go back to the house. It is a Tuesday evening. Reaper is watching the game. Des is in the back on the phone. Monroe is not there. Monroe is rarely at the house, which is by design. Monroe maintains physical distance from the operational center as a structural principle. You sit on the couch. You watch the game with Reaper. He explains a play that you didn't follow. You nod. This is the last night of 16 months. You know it and no one else in the room does. At 6:14 the following morning, warrants execute simultaneously at 9 locations across the south and west sides. Monroe is arrested at his home in Beverly, a quiet neighborhood, brick houses, the kind of block that looks nothing like what it has been funding. He comes to the door in a robe. He is handed the warrant. He reads it fully before he says anything, which is exactly what you would expect from a man who spent 12 years reading municipal documents for a living. He says, "I'd like to call my attorney." Des is arrested at the car detail shop. Tools still in his hands. Reaper is arrested at his mother's house. A Sunday. He had just arrived. The 2 law enforcement officials on Monroe's payroll, a deputy chief and a Federal Review Board member, are taken into custody by a separate team operating out of the Eastern District, away from the Chicago field office entirely, because the chain of evidence for those arrests cannot pass through any system that either of them has touched. 44 arrests total. 17 federal charges. The full operational map of the South Side distribution network, documented by one undercover officer over 16 months, forms the evidentiary spine of a case that prosecutors will call the most complete picture of a metropolitan distribution network ever assembled in a single investigation. You are extracted at 6 a.m., before the warrants execute, by Diaz in an unmarked car on a corner 3 blocks from the house. You get in the car. You don't say anything for a long time. Diaz says, "You held 56 days. You say, "Reaper told me moving was better than waiting." She says, "The man you just helped arrest told you that?" You say, "He wasn't wrong." What 56 days of silence costs. The debrief runs 9 days. 11 hours a day, 2 prosecutors, 1 FBI liaison, and a psychologist who sits in the corner and says almost nothing and takes notes that you are never shown. You give them everything. The full map. The 14 nodes. The 3 supply corridors. The cash processing rotation. The names, the ranks, the payment schedules of the 2 officials. Every planning session with Monroe, reconstructed from memory in the exact sequence it occurred, because you kept nothing written down and carried it all in your head for the last 9 months of the operation because you knew, at some level, that the lines of communication were not secure. On the 9th day, the lead prosecutor, a woman named Chen who has not once in 9 days expressed anything other than professional focus, looks up from her notes and says, "This is the most complete single-source intelligence picture we have received from any undercover operation in the history of the Midwest Division." You say, "Kowalski built the platform. I just stayed on it." She says, "You stayed on it for 56 days with no support and no exit and the knowledge that the silence might be hostile." You say, "I didn't have a better option." She says, "Most people would have found one." You don't respond. Because the honest answer is that the reason you didn't find another option is not courage, and it is not professionalism, and it is not the mission. The honest answer is that by day 41, Marcus Tate was sufficiently real. The kitchen, the eggs, the game on Tuesday nights, that walking out of it required a kind of severance that you were not ready to perform until Reaper told you that waiting was always worse than moving. You were not held in place by the operation. You were held in place by the life. That is the thing you tell the psychologist in a separate session, because it is the thing you cannot say in a room with prosecutors. She writes it down. She says, "That's the most honest thing I've heard in a debrief in 6 years." You say, "Is it a problem?" She says, "It's the thing we need to work on." Monroe receives a 31-year sentence. He is 53 years old. Des receives 12 years. Reaper receives 8. His attorney argues, successfully, that his operational role was primarily defensive and that his cooperation in the football program constitutes a documented record of community engagement. The judge reduces the sentence by 18 months. You read the sentencing summaries in a hotel room in a city you were reassigned to after the operation. You read Reaper's last and you sit with it for a while. 8 years. His daughter. He had mentioned a daughter once, briefly, in the way that men in that world mention the things they are protecting, will be in high school when he gets out. You think about what he said on day 41. Better to choose when than wait for when to choose you. He was giving you advice. Real advice from a real place, because that is who he was in addition to everything else he was. And you used it. And it worked. And he is going to spend 8 years in a federal facility because of a case built substantially on 16 months of your presence in his life. The accounting on that does not close. It never closes. You will learn this slowly, over the years that follow, as you run other operations and come out of other covers and sit in other debriefs. The accounting never closes because the categories on each side of the ledger are not commensurable. Lives disrupted. Networks dismantled. People protected on one side. People known, genuinely known, and still handed to the system on the other. The job requires you to hold both. What the job does not tell you is how. The network doesn't stop. The Southside distribution network reconstitutes within 7 months. Not in the same configuration. Monroe's 14-node structure was specific to his methodology, and the people who understood it are either incarcerated or gone. The new structure is simpler in some ways, more redundant in others. It has learned from what failed. The 2 officials whose names you carried for 9 months and delivered on a bench in Millennium Park. Their removal was filled, within 4 months, by 2 other officials. Different people. Same position in the architecture. Monroe understood this. The organization is not the people. The organization is the map. Maps do not get arrested. You are in a different city now. Different operation, different cover, different name you answer to without pause. You have a handler with a perfect contact record. You check in on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Every time the line connects, for 1/2 second before she speaks, you feel something not rational, not professional, without a clean name. Relief. Not that the mission is proceeding. Just that someone is there. That the thread is intact. Because you know what the other version feels like. 41 days in a kitchen with a phone that connects to nothing. The only direction available being forward, deeper, further into a life that fits you in ways your real one doesn't quite anymore. You know what it costs to be trapped. You know what it costs to get out. You go back in anyway. Because the operation needs someone with patience. Someone who builds trust in small increments. Someone who can hold a cover as long as it needs to hold. Your supervisor calls it your defining professional quality. You have stopped being sure what to call it.